Well, hello, Scott. Are
Welcome,
you are
welcome.
you
Hi.
excited to do this?
I am. I'm ready to do it. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So this is a new experiment, I guess. Two devs on a mic. I guess on two mics. We each have a mic. Be weird if we were in the same room sharing one mic, I guess. Uh, and we're just gonna like talk about what we're building. So let's do some introductions. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and say like what you're working on and go from there?
Sure. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so I'm Scott or CluckDev on Twitter. So I've been a software engineer for well over a decade now. Started off back probably skipped university, so I went straight into kind of the full end of technical development. So I started off doing software testing and UAT for kind of the point of sales machines that used to have at the places where you go to pay at restaurants. From there, moved on to kind of more enterprise applications like digital signage. From there, kind of built out my skill set over the next 5, 6 years, building digital signage and kind of point of sales implementations, mainly focused on real time and distributed scalability. So a lot of what we're focused on for some of these big blue chips was like 30,000 screens all displaying the same advert in real time at the same time. So there's a lot of kind of synchronicity issues in
That's
that.
pretty cool.
So spent a lot of time building out kind of proof of concepts and MVPs of various real-time systems. And from there, kind of got involved in machine learning, built out a various amount of concepts and implementations in machine learning, mainly around image recognition. So I did a lot around number plate recognition and vehicle recognition in the UK. Built out a company around that. And then from there, went into what we call kind of smart cities, I guess now, which is essentially kind of mass surveillance stuff. Then spent about a year in there and realized probably not the best place to be spending my time. So jumped into crypto, which I guess is the complete opposite of the smart city implementations. And went,
A little
hey, we
bit,
need
a little bit.
we need a little bit more anonymity. We need a little bit more control. So for the past 3, 4 years, I've spent my time in crypto, mainly on Solana, building out infrastructure and systems to kind of support the next generation of DeFi and autonomous systems. So two main projects we're working on at the moment is FluxBeam/FluxBot, which is a decentralized exchange and Telegram bot. And on the other side, we're working on a security product called RugCheck, which is aimed at really trying to prevent the scams and the rugs that we're seeing going across all these meme coins over the past couple of months.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really cool. I was actually going to ask you what you meant by digital signage because like I've heard the term before, but I was like, what does that mean? But I guess like the digital billboards and those like random things. How do those work? I guess do they all have? Because I've thought about like a digital picture frame. Actually, thought about building one as like a NFT viewer thing. Did a whole bunch of research on like Alibaba. Had some conversations. Never ended up pulling the trigger on it. But like, do those typically have a like some sort of like Raspberry Pi type device in the back that's just like, going out to an HDMI port, or is it like they're all connected over like some sort of custom embedded device?
Yeah, so it's a pretty interesting kind of innovation actually. Like it started off of literally, I mean, and still to this day, most of the large billboards will be running off like a 3 grand PC sitting in a server room next to it somewhere, because they need the GPUs to run it. But anything you see in pubs or you see kind of below, I'd say 48 inch, are all running system on chip now. So Samsung has a platform called Tizen, which is a
Hmm.
system on chip embedded system essentially. And from there, you can build pretty much whatever you want. It's essentially its own ecosystem akin to the App Store.
Ooh.
You use their SDK, you get access to all the nice little goodies you can get from the embedded device. And then from there, you can build up a little app, whether it's a picture viewer or a full real time signage implementation. For the most part, it's a light client. So you try and do everything server side and just send what you need to the client. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty powerful innovation stuff, and they're all
Hmm.
connected via a mesh network. So you can imagine how easy it is to
Oh,
distribute
that's cool.
content via these embedded devices rather than trying to have to build a whole HFT distribution system
Yeah.
for it.
Ooh, yeah. That could get real annoying without that. That's really cool. I might have to pick your brain at some point if I ever pull the trigger on that NFT picture frame viewer thing. Because I was originally planning on doing it with like Raspberry Pis, and I was just like, trying to work with like Alibaba manufacturers. They were just like, no, you can't install your own custom app. I was like, I don't trust what apps you're going to install on this Android device. So, ugh,
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah. It's I'd say it's still a very early industry. I mean, like, I'll be honest, some of the system on chip designs, I should say, coming out when I started were essentially that it was before it was the Arduino minis basically
Hmm.
stuck to the back of the screen and then a load of wire and hot solder, hot glue kind of sticking it all together. So yeah, it's kind of crazy
Engineering marvel
how
right there. Love it.
oh fantastic, absolutely fantastic, and they charge you $2,000 for the pleasure of it as well. But yeah, it's an interesting market, that's for sure.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I guess I'll share some details about myself before we kind of like keep going. So I'm Nick. I also am in the Solana ecosystem for, I guess anyone who sees this that doesn't already know either of us. I feel like most people will probably already recognize both of us. But I am currently full time at Solana Foundation. I'm on the developer relations team, and that varies day to day of like what that actually means. Developer relations is this weird combination of engineering and marketing and education kind of roll up into one. So like any given day, it kind of fluctuates between those three on this like weird spectrum of DevRel. And before I was here at Foundation, I was actually active duty Navy. I was active duty for about 10 years on submarines and operating nuclear reactors on submarines, specifically on like the electric plant side and like maintaining a bunch of electrical equipment, switchboards, circuit breakers, power generation equipment kind of stuff. And then during that time, I kind of like went to got a whole bunch of like certifications that are pretty common, but like more on the higher level of the certifications you get. And I ended up going to this like training simulator, which could like simulate a nuclear reactor plant on the submarine. And we could just like imagine like a flight simulator, but for a nuclear reactor plant on a submarine. And like on a flight simulator, you would think that you can do like bad scenarios like your engine blew up or a bird flew into it, your window broke, and like see what the pilot does to react. Imagine that, but for a submarine and a nuclear reactor, and we could do all sorts of crazy things to it, and just to like see how people would react and if they could like figure things out. We used to have this slogan of much like State Farm, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two, because we have seen some wild stuff, and like you never know what someone's going to do when they're in a high stress environment. And it's like some people just do like weird things, and we just like we're in this like viewing room just like looking down on them as they're like operating a bunch of equipment, and we're just like, what are they doing? Or like sometimes people get like really intelligent things and be like, oh, here's this like new thing that we've never seen before. We're like, damn, that's really smart. It varies all over the spectrum. And then after that, about almost a year and a half ago now, I transitioned to the blockchain space working at Foundation, Solana Foundation, and doing this whole DevRel thing now. And then in all my free time, I build a bunch of side projects. Currently, like you mentioned a couple of yours, the big one I'm working on now is Sulfate, which is it started out as like just a podcast, kind of. Where it was like, hey, me and my friend James were podcasting about the Solana industry and the Solana ecosystem, and then like now we're actually expanding it to all sorts of different content. We have a newsletter and blog posts and like written articles and stuff, and then I have a couple of assorted products and services that we're going to like build into Sulfate, which we'll probably end up talking about here on the show at some point. And that's like the big one. And then my newest project that I'm working on is a personal finance app for the crypto native. And mostly because like I've wanted one for a long period of time. Like I like the idea of like tracking your personal finances, but like no good finance apps like care about crypto. So like I'm taking the inverse approach where I'm going to start with all things crypto because that's like the thing I can't get. Be able to like categorize transactions and like make it so it's easier to file your taxes because that's like such a hurdle and such a nightmare for people, especially with like Solana staking. Is just like it's awful. So that's like the current project that I'm working on, and probably some other like random ones in there too. But that's the big one.
I guess it'd be cool to kind of learn more about that kind of implementation then, because I mean, I think from our side, like we see tax as an absolute nightmare as well. Like especially from like, I mean, we run a large amount of arbitrage on our side, and trying to reconcile 30,000 transactions per epoch or 300,000 transactions per epoch is a nightmare. And Yeah, I mean, like Ethereum is all right because obviously you had some lower block space, or you could,
it makes it easier because you can't get that many transactions in so
yeah,
quickly.
exactly. But now you can pack 30, 40 transactions in per slot. Like it's a completely different ball game, and it's almost
Yeah.
like everything we've built in Web3 for Ethereum, it kind of translates, but not so much. I mean, even I think the Explorer side
Yeah.
is really struggling at the moment as there's just so much data coming in and there's so much
Hmm.
new information being fed into the system all the time. I mean, every 400 milliseconds, you have an entire new state coming through essentially.
Yeah.
It's so hard to get that continuity, continuity, I can't even say it.
Continuity.
That's the one. That's the one.
Words are hard.
Oh, it's a nightmare. But yeah, I mean, like, there's been a lot of topics on Twitter, and I think over a few of the dev boards over the past week around trying to get like reliable indexing. I think that's where it needs to start as well. Like,
Yeah.
the data at the moment is very, very hard to get to, and if you would want to do anything historical analytics wise, like, good luck. Like, 10 grand for a Google
Yeah.
BigQuery is,
BigQuery just,
yeah.
oh goodness. So full disclosure, it's a very new app. I haven't gotten to that part yet, but I have some thoughts on implementation, and I'll share them. So there's a couple of things that I'm thinking about for implementation because, like you just described, there is so much data you have to care about. Um, so like the MVP version of this, how I'm thinking is, um, basically I'm just going to use webhooks from an RPC provider. And I'm gonna just send a have a webhook set up to only listen to the accounts of like the users. So like every user can have, however many accounts that they want on the finance on the personal finance platform. It's called Nickle, just because I like domain names, and I got the Nickle.app. Um, and it's like, it's nickel, so it's like monetary. So I thought it was clever. And so the initial version is just going to be webhooks that are listening in for those accounts, and then it's just going to ingest that raw transaction that the RPC provider sends to me. And that's like pretty straightforward. Like you can get a lot of data just by listening, but then so that's like capturing the new data as it comes in, as each of your, all your various accounts are doing transactions. The next part is that backfilling from all the historical data. And so like the thing I'm thinking about is probably what I'm going to do, at least for the first version. And I don't know how well this is going to scale. Probably not. Uh, but what I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to have like, I'm going to write a sort of like a queuing engine that's just going to go through and just do request signatures for address and just go through on every single account that a user has on their profile and just do the full get signatures for address, because my goal is to store every single transaction for a user for all of their accounts, because like for the financial aspect, especially for taxes and accounting, like you need every single one. So I need to try to get every single one. It's going to be a lot of RPC calls, but what I'm kind of thinking is like you do like a get signatures for address, you get the batch of like, I don't remember if it's 100 or 1,000 is the max signature. It's a factor of 10
250, I think, isn't it?
per
255.
each get sig address.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Either way, I'm gonna like try to get that, get the list of them, and then just like throw each of those, because like you don't get any data other than the signatures, the actual like signature ID. So then I have to like throw those into like a queue that's just like gonna have workers just rolling around the clock to just ingest, just like get the actual transaction itself for each of those, so I can get the raw data and then like put it in the database. Um, and so that's like the MVP version. And to note is every single user, it's going to be like a multi-tenant database system. Every single user will get a dedicated database instance. So that way, from the user perspective, you have like data segregation, like my data, my transaction data is not going to be mixed with your transaction data. And that's good for two reasons. One, you get data segregation. There's no like cross pollination, no like potential risk of my information being leaked to another user on the platform. But the other aspect, which I think is more people will care about realistically, is if you're not trying to query every single user's data, you're only trying to query a single user's data. That's way less data to query. So your transaction, the actual like database requests are going to be way faster because there's just like less data. Um, and one of the things that I'm actually really excited to do is I'm going to use this newer platform called Terso, least I think that's how it's pronounced.
Okay.
Are you familiar with them?
No, I haven't heard of that one.
Okay. So it's SQLite
Okay.
databases. So but they took SQLite, since it's open source, they actually started adding additional features to make it so SQLite databases can take remote connections, which like is not possible with normal SQLite. So their platform is basically like you can send a post, you can like use their like REST API, and you can just spin up like tenant databases, and you just get a dedicated SQLite database for every user. So that's like how I'm going to do it, which I think will be like really fun. And I'm really excited to do it. I broke ground on the code last night for like the multi-tenant side of it to like start doing it, but I have to like figure out the actual like table structure that I want for each of these transactions, because I want it to be not only like Solana transactions are going to be supported by default, but eventually like other blockchains, other fiat currencies. You can have like your normal bank accounts, like a full personal finance app. So it needs to be like flexible enough that it can do it, but also like designed intelligently so I can still like efficiently like execute queries, which like, who knows?
No, that sounds fascinating. I mean, I've got like 50 questions off the bat out of that, but I think like
let's go.
the real one, like I think like because we've struggled with it from our side, especially trying to like ingest users' transactions and work out, okay, did they spend or did they receive? Like, what is the composition of that transaction essentially? Like, what are your thoughts around how to tackle that? Because I think there's various ways to tackle a Solana transaction. Like, do you go balance changes? Do you go token balance changes? Do you go decoding all the individual transactions or instructions? Where's your head out of that?
My MVP version, it's probably not going to do much of that, because it is a complicated thing to do. Like simple transactions are like a simple token transfer, like a one-to-one token transfer. You can, if you have the raw transaction, like that JSON format that like Web3.js spits out, or the Rust client spits out, like a simple transaction that's like a one-to-one token transfer or an NFT transfer or something like that, you can parse that pretty easily. So like you can capture like the 80-20 pretty straightforward, I think. So like I'm gonna have to write like some sort of parser in order to do it, and honestly I'll probably just open source that parser too. I don't know if the platform itself is going to be open source, but I'll probably just open source like random bits of it, like that parser, just because like so many people could use it. Why not just like make it so people don't have to keep rewriting the same code? And so like doing some simple parsing there, and then for like complicated transactions that have like multiple instructions, that's like the 20% that I haven't like thought much about, because like it's going to have to be, in the end goal would be flexible enough that you could smartly handle any program, but because of like CPIs and composability and all that kind of stuff, and like not knowing data structures, like you can get the I think the raw transaction will give you like the base 64 encoded bytes from it, but you need to know how to deserialize that in order to handle it correctly. So there's probably going to be like a standard collection of programs that are like supported and known to try to like make it like a 90-10 or 95-5% of like only 5% of transactions are like kind of unknown. Because like my goal is make it so the platform can kind of almost auto detect and autofill, like auto categorize your transactions for you, especially for tax purposes. Like that makes it way easier. And then you could, like, the user can always go back and like manually set things. So that's probably what it's going to fall back to, is like, hey, if the system can't auto detect it, then it'll give you like a notification of like, hey, you need to manually check these transactions, like what happened. But still try to fill in as much things as possible. Maybe even like listing out a couple of options like, hey, our system thinks it was X, Y, or Z. Which, do you agree with one of these? Is it something else? And like kind of use that to like better build the parser system. But that's kind of how I'm like initially thinking about it for right now.
Yeah, no, that sounds really cool. I mean, I think from our side, like we settled on just going off the balance changes, because like you said, like if you try and go down the instruction decoding route, like you end up, and we're seeing it from rug checkers, we've got 30, 40, 50 integrations all wanting to try and get in, and you're going, oh crap, like okay, we need to prioritize this firstly, but then equally like how do you go about scaling that? And I think the only thing that we've seen really that works from that perspective is almost like the DeFi Llama approach of where they kind of half open source. So they say, look, our adapter interface is open source.
Yeah.
So if you want your program supported, you make a pull request. And I think that's probably the most sustainable way of doing it going forward. Because I do think we're running into this issue with Solana of everyone's running and building in silos and is building all this cool stuff. But it's like you look for an IDL and it's next to impossible. I mean, I built Whales meme and DGen Funds DEX integration into FluxBot the other day, and just trying to find those two IDLs took me 2-3 hours, and I had to go decode it off the front end and go find the PDAs in the code, and it's all encrypted and stuff. So you have to go deserialize it through a JSON decoder, and it's that whole kind of stepping stone approach that I think we need to try and cut out. And almost like the Anchor repository from kind of a year and a half ago was wicked, because you go there, you could find your Rust crates that you needed, and then you could also find the IDL. But I think that's now kind of disappeared. I saw some stuff on Twitter the other day that's either no longer maintained or is just kind of out of date. But I really think we need something in the ecosystem that kind of plugs that gap of where devs can go to and they know, okay, I'm going to get my IDL, I'm going to get my PDAs and my manifest that I need, and then I'm also going to get the crate if there is one for, say, JS or Rust.
Which part are you saying that doesn't exist anymore, is not maintained?
I just think in general, like the past 5-6 new programs that have come out, I mean, pump.fun, Whales meme, DGen Fund, Radium CPMM. I mean, Radium did a great job. They always do a great job of their documentation on that side for their products, but there's no central repository for you to go to and find all of that information.
I see.
So we've had a few different approaches. I think
fair.
that there's like Solana Explorer at one point as well that kind of half got us there, but then that was kind of left and abandoned. So there almost needs to be like a dev repository for Solana, I think.
Yeah. So I guess are you trying to just specifically get the IDLs, or are you trying to get other information too? Or is it only the IDLs?
Yeah, I mean, the IDLs get you 90% of the way there, but I think you do need those PDA seeds as well. That's the real one that slows us down, I think, on our side of like, you've got the IDL, but it's like, okay, well, how do I compose account 3, 4, and 5? And you have to go search through and find it. It's nightmare. I mean, I think probably credit where credit's due, Metaplex does the best job of documentation. I mean, you can get the IDL straight away, you get a TypeScript SDK, you get a Rust SDK, and you get all the seeds printed out in a lovely little doc. Like if we like, and it must be something that we can kind of compose on top of an IDL or on top of Anchor to also generate this stuff out. Because again, it's all in there. Like we've got the Anchor seed generation as well, but it's almost like we've got a little bit of a missing link there somewhere. Because I mean, that would make the tax thing so much easier if you could just plug into a central repository, pass instantly all your transaction instructions. It just makes the whole thing far, far simpler for people.
I mean, so I'm trying to pull up the Anchor IDL stuff. So like Anchor IDLs just got updated in Anchor 0.30, and I'm trying to remember if the new IDL spec includes the seeds, because like there was a bunch of changes with the new IDL spec, and I'm trying to remember if it includes the seeds. But either way, one of the other things that's going on in the ecosystem is like the Web3.js team, Stephen Lucier, who's just so amazing, so incredibly intelligent, also a phenomenal stageman. Like I don't know if you caught his breakpoint talk of Web3.js. He's a phenomenal stageman. Oh my goodness. But the Web3.js team, and like Loris, who used to be at Metaplex, is now at Anza working on Web3.js. So like a lot of the JavaScript tooling that exists at Metaplex, like Loris made most of that, and now he's like working on Web3.js. And so like the new version of Web3.js actually is supposed to solve a lot of these problems, where it's like you can basically get rid of the Anchor TypeScript SDK, where it's like Anchor's like auto generation kind of stuff. Like Web3.js should handle that natively, which is like really cool. But then you do still run into the problem of like getting the IDL, and like the thing that's in the works for that is kind of in the lines of the what's it called, verified builds, where like the verified builds make it so like encourages more open source so people can like verify your code, which is good, but also like it makes it composability a lot easier, because you can like look at their structs and like generate the IDL. If you can't like find it elsewhere, you can just manually generate it. But with that, I think they're implementing a system that like better facilitates like an IDL repository sort of thing, like natively with the chain. So like the combination of those two things, like yes, they're still in the works, and hopefully before Breakpoint in a couple of months, like we'll get some news to announce, or that gets like announced to the ecosystem. But I think those will solve a lot of these problems, and then runtime v2.
Hell yeah,
whenever that shows up.
Yeah, that's going to be the golden goose when runtime v2 drops. I mean, like the spoilers from last year still have me excited. So like, yeah, it's going to make development so much easier. So I cannot wait.
At the Breakpoint talk of last year in 2023 for Breakpoint, there were two talks that got like standing ovations. It was Fire Dancer, makes sense, and then it was Runtime V2. And like the Runtime V2 talk was on like one of the smaller stages, and it was completely packed, and there was just like constantly people clapping as like the basically two devs behind it. They're just like, yeah, and there's this thing, it solves this, and everyone's just like, yeah. And it was like the entire talk was like that, just constant clapping and cheers. Runtime V2 is going to solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, I think that's when composability really unlocks. Like that is just going to make everything so much more fun to develop on Solana. But it's good to see that we've kind of got these intermediary implementations going through just to kind of see us over to that V2 implementation. I mean, if there's an IDL repository with seeds, I did see that seeds was on like an Anchor flag. I don't know if they maybe changed that on the latest version then, but that'd be amazing, because I think with those two, and I think it's interesting because we're not a JavaScript shop. Like we obviously write in JavaScript for the front end, but all of our code is in Golang or Rust. So
nice.
It's always quite an interesting implementation of where we have to do these integrations of. From a JavaScript perspective, I think a lot of the ecosystem is becoming a lot easier. Like you can go and you can find a JavaScript SDK. The problem is, and I think it's going to become a big problem, and we're seeing it starting to occur from a RoadCheck side, from our monitors at the moment, of you've got so many more third-party dependencies in these JavaScript SDKs than I think a lot of people realize. And it's why we go for Golang and why we stay at the low level without these libraries of you really don't know what you're importing during them. And we're seeing a lot of kind of supply side or vendor upstream attacks during this. And I think it's almost like we need to get a point of where a JSON file should suffice. Like we shouldn't need to go through this whole NPM and no modules implementation to get to that final solution. I think it should be composable off that just basic IDL.
Agreed. Yeah. But then you have to get the IDL still.
Yeah.
If we go back to the same problem. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I agree. How do you? I mean, you mentioned Go. How do you guys find the comparison of Go versus Rust for doing Solana things?
It's probably a bad take, but I really like working in Go for Solana and Rust. Like obviously, the contract side you write in Rust, and that's fine. And I do like writing in Rust if I really need the absolute peak performance, but for 99% of applications, like Go will suffice. There is no need to do that extra 10%. And quite frankly, the speed you get from a Go engineer versus a Rust engineer that's both at the same competence level, like you write reams more Golang application code than you can Rust. Okay, you may lose 5-10% on the absolute top end, but you can horizontally scale most stuff if you build it correctly. So for us, it keeps our developer velocity high and maintains channels for us, and the Go routines are a real powerhouse. Like we can parallelize pretty much all of our workflows, and we've got huge kind of diagnostic pipelines running in Go purely for that reason. So yeah, I think it's just a combination of ease of use, developer velocity, and the fact that we can just take an IDL with a little copy and paste and a few bits of kind of bike tweaking. We can get a full Golang SDK printed out the back of it in under 30 seconds, and it works with all of kind of our existing toolkit. So I mean, I think it works really sweet. Well, and you don't have the whole issue of dependency issues that Rust is so plagued with at the moment.
Rust dependency issues. They're getting a lot better. I actually recorded the changelog earlier today, and Kevin Heavey, the man, the myth, the legend, he has been like I've been actively looking at the commits on the Agave repo for months now, doing the change logs, and I keep seeing like the last probably about a month and a half, he's had so many merged commits that are merged PRs that the entire point of them is just like removing dependencies and like breaking the dependency chain, where it's like, this thing doesn't need to be in here, removed it, compile times go down. And it's like he gives like a little metrics for each one, and like he's just like seemingly single-handedly like breaking this dependency problem, and just like on top of it, the Agave core engineers are like separating all the main stuff into separate crates to like help with that too. But he's just like doing all like the last little leg of things, and it's just like, oh my goodness, it's gotten a lot better, and hopefully it will stay that way and get even better.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's night and day from what, like 3-6 months ago. Like our devs would have nightmares of trying to upgrade some of the contracts to like even a minor version. You'd be like, please, no, that's going to be 4 hours out of my day trying to upgrade them. But I mean, I think our last deploy, there's still niggles, but it's nothing like it was 3 months ago. So we're definitely moving in the right direction, and yeah, it can only get better, I think.
Hopefully.
Well, I hope.
I mean, could always get worse.
Well, please,
hopefully
no.
it doesn't.
Please.
Knock on wood somewhere. Find it everywhere. Yeah. All right. Cool, man. Yeah, this is exciting. This is great to talk with you. Great to get to know you too. And you know, we'll be doing this every other week, I guess, and we'll see how it goes. I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up here soon. Is there anything else you want to talk about or mention?
No, I think that's probably a pretty good first episode. I mean, I think, yeah, from our side, we've mainly been looking at congestion over the past couple of weeks. Like, we got bandwidth markets, that's a big thing we're looking at. But it seems like congestion, for the most part, on Solana, I mean, fingers crossed, looks to be getting resolved. I think the past few patches from Agave looks to have really resolved that. So, yeah, fingers crossed that we'll see Solana back to normal and kind of churning away over the next couple of weeks when these final remaining patches go live. And I think, yeah, he's upwards from there. Like, we've been operating on a broken chain for 6 months, so it's going to be nice to get some speed back out of it. I mean, I always go back to whenever I develop on DevNet, I'm always like, wow, this is a fantastic chain. And then I come back on mainnet, I'm like, why is it so slow? This is ridiculous. This wasn't what I promised. But yeah, no, I think we'll get back there. Like all the work from, especially the guys over at Triton, Bandwidth Markets.
Oh yeah, that's really cool.
Guys over at Marinade. Like there's so many kind of hella smart people working on this stuff that I think we'll get through it. And yeah, I think it's going to be exciting times over the next couple of weeks as we see what's being released. Especially excited to see what you guys up at Foundation have got planned for upcoming up to Breakpoint as well.
There's some stuff planned, man. There's some stuff planned. Yeah, maybe next episode we talk about kind of like the trials and tribulations that you guys have been experiencing with that congestion, because like FluxBot and FluxBeam, like you guys have a lot of users, you guys have a lot of scale, you're sending a lot of transactions, you know, your users are sending a lot of transactions. So be curious to hear you know, how that's gone and what you guys have done to kind of combat that congestion. That'd be cool to do like tech deep dives into.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, that's been a journey we've been on since beginning of November last year. So yeah, I've got some war stories from that for sure. It's been a long journey to get back up to 99% delivery.
All right, well, there's the teaser, I guess. And nice. Yeah, let's go ahead and wrap this up. We'll see you next time.
Awesome. Sounds good.